So we're going to start in the chapter 2, and this is just kind of a preliminary lecture to go into some of the things we're going to develop throughout the chapter. And one of the things we're going to talk about is data distribution. Squeeze in the word distribution there. Ooh. So what's going on with this is we want to ultimately come up with a picture of our data. The reason is they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. If we just look at a whole bunch of data just handed to us, it's something that we might not be able to make heads or tails of. We might not see any trends or patterns or anything like that. So if we can make a picture out of it, we might see something that's interesting, something that, well, we might want to study more. So data distribution is one way of looking at this. And one of the things we're going to look at is for categories of data. Now, these categories could be, say, example, grades on a quiz. So a grade of A would be a category, a grade of B would be a category, and so on. So for categories of data, how often do values appear? That's a way of paraphrasing it a bit in the definition. So for each category, how often do we see some piece of data for that category? So for example, how many A's were earned, how many B's, and so on. And again, we're going to try to visualize this in some way. So I want to do this using what we're going to call a frequency table. And we're going to develop this a little more sophisticated later on. But the frequency table I'm going to illustrate these using an example. So let's say we do have our quiz. So let's say this is the distribution for grades on a quiz. So for A's on this particular quiz, there were 5. For B's, there were 2. For C's, there were 3. For D's, there was 1. And for F's, there was 3. And this gives us some idea of frequency. Now let me take a step back here. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's say the data was like this. Let's see here. Make sure we've got all of our values. Yeah, we do. So this is the data you're actually going to get. And we can organize this into some kind of frequencies. So if you just look at this, it might not make any sense. But we can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ooh, got an extra A in here. Let me make sure I've got these right. Got 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, no, we had it. Oh, 5 A's. There we go. Let's see, we've got 2 B's. Let's see, we've got 1, 2. I think we're missing a C. There we go. 3 C's. There's 1 D. There's 3 F's. And okay, we've got it all here. We've got 14. So this is the example we want to work on. Looking at this, it's just a jumble of letters. Now, we can organize this in the frequencies as we had earlier. Let's count the number of A's. Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Number of B's, just like before, there was 2. Number of C's, 1, 2, 3. Number of D's, there's 1. And the number of F's, 1, 2, and 3. Now this might make things a little easier. I mean, this is kind of jumbled. Okay, there's some order we can put to this, and we can take a look at this and get some idea of, well, the grades are kind of balanced. There's sort of a dearth or a lack of D's, and then there's a whole bunch of A's. So we're starting to see some patterns here. We go from this to this, we kind of see something. Now what we'll do is we'll put this a little more in a table. Put this in a different format. So now we put in the frequencies. There were 5 A's, 2 B's, 3 C's, 1 D, 3 F's. And so in this frequency chart, or frequency table, as they call it in the text, this gives us an idea maybe what's going on. So looking at this, yeah, there's a bunch of A's here. And the other grades are kind of balanced. Okay, this one's a little out, a little bit of, is it an outlier? But it's not like these other 3. But this one really stands out. So hopefully the chart or table helps show patterns or behavior. So hopefully we can see something here that stands out. And a couple things we see is that generally the grades seem balanced, except there's only 1 D, and there's a big jump in A's. There's a big jump in A's. I'll see if you can see that here. Let me write that up here. Looks like it's a little hard to see. So the grades seem balanced. There's only 1 D, and there's a jump in A's. So that's what the chart can give us. So again, it's hopefully more helpful than just a list of data. Now, something else we can do is, and maybe this is even more helpful, is a relative frequency chart or a table. And so what we're going to do here, we're going to convert each frequency to a % of the total. So we're going to do this. When I talk about total, it'll be the total number of data. In other words, all the grades. The total number will be the number of all the grades we got. So for the total, well, what we have, well, we have 5 A's, 2 B's, 3 C's, 1 D, 3 F's. So you have 14 total grades. So that's going to be our total. Now, we're going to make the conversions. So for A's, we take the number of grades for A's. So I'm going to give you the general formula. So it's the frequency for a category. We'll just put a hold off on that. Divided by the total. I'm running out of room here. I'm going to squeeze this in times 100%. So we take the frequency for the category, how many data elements are in the category, divide by the total number of data elements, multiplied by 100%. So let's do this for each letter grade. So for A's, the frequency for A's, there were 5 A's out of a total of 14 grades. Let me multiply that by 100%. And I'm going to round here. I'm going to round to the 10th and grab my calculator. So it's about 35.7%. So that's the frequency for A's. Now for B's. There were 2 B's out of 14 total grades. So we take 2 divided by 14. Remember, when we're talking about fractions, fractions mean division. So if you recall your division sign, you can think of that as a fraction bar. This dot's a numerator, and that dot's a denominator. So 2 divided by 14, multiplied by 100, we get about 14.3. C's. So for C's, we had 3 C's out of 14 grades. And again, I'm going to round to the tenths here. So that comes out to about 21.4%. I'll box this one, come back here and box that one. D's. There was 1 D. So 1 divided by 14 times 100, about 7.1%. Finally, F's. Well, there were 3 F's. And again, we've done this calculation already, 21.4 about. Now, the author makes a point that with round-off error, you might get a total that doesn't quite equal 100%. And for now, in this section, the author says that's going to be okay. So we're going to go with this. So if you ever do this and you get slightly under 100% or slightly over 100% because of round-off error, for now, that's going to be all right. So we're going to put this in a relative frequency chart. I'm going to write these up here. So I can erase and make some room. And then all right. And there we go. So again, these are they're a little similar. This one seems to be kind of low, but this one jumps up quite a bit. And so that's something, again, like the frequency table or chart we looked at earlier, it's it might give you an idea of what's going on with this data. And if you feel more comfortable with percents, well, there you go. You can use percents to explore what your data is doing. So we have our frequency table or frequency chart. We have our relative frequency table or chart. Now we have another one, cumulative. Again, we're trying these different types of charts to help us visualize what's going on. Again, something better than just a list of jumbled data. So what we're going to do with this, I'm going to illustrate it with an example, is we want to see how the total is growing. So this is how we're going to do that. So the number of F's, well, that's 3 for this one quiz. Now we might ask, at least a D. Well, if you get at least a D, that's the number of F's plus the number of D's. So you have the number of F's, we'll start out with that, 3, plus the number of D's, and that's going to give you 4 because there were 3 F's and 1 D. So now we might say, okay, so we started out with F's, we've increased the grade up to D's, let's increase it to C's. Well, how many people at least got a C? So there's 3 F's, 1 D, and there were 3 C's. And that comes out to 7. So what about at least a B? Well, 3 F's, 1 D, plus 3 C's, plus 2 B's, that comes out to 9. And you can kind of see what's going on here. You can look at the jumps in the total. So 3 to 4 is not much. But then, okay, this is a jump of 3, this is a jump of 2. These two jumps are kind of similar. They're a little bigger than this one. And then finally, at least an A. Plus 5 A's. So we have 3 F's, 1 D, 3 C's, 2 B's, and 5 A's. And that comes out to the total of 14. So now we're going to put this in a chart. And again, we're going to see if this helps us, see some kind of pattern. So for the number of F's, we got 3. Happens. Now, I need to relabel this. Let me call this at least a D. I'll call this at least a C. At least a B. At least an A. So we take those cumulative totals. So we had for at least a D, 3 F's plus 1 D, gave us a total of 4. For at least a C, we had 3 F's, 1 D, and 3 C's. That came up to 7. And keep in mind, it looks like I'm doing 4 plus 3 here. I'm actually not. By coincidence, it just looks that way. It's really 3 F's plus 1 D plus 3 C's, and it just happens to come out to 7. And this happens to add up to 7. Remember, this is not the total number of D's. This is D's and F's. And then we tack on 3 more C's to get 7. So at least a B. Well, there were 2 B's. So that brings us up to 9. And finally, at least an A. Well, there were 5 A's. That brings us up to 14. So again, we look for patterns. And we see this is a jump of 3, this is a jump of 2. So they're kind of similar. But there's a small jump from F to D's. And then a large jump from B's to A's. So this is what we can do with a cumulative frequency chart. Finally, another way of approaching this there's a saying. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So we're getting some idea what's going on. Hopefully we've improved on things compared to the list of data that's just sitting there. So what if we really do have a picture? And this is where we get into histograms. One, two, three, 4, and 5. So here's the frequency for A's. And there's the frequency for B's. C's. D's. And finally F's. So we might label this grades. And usually would label on the side here, or write what we would usually put. You might say frequencies, frequency. Put that off to the side. But this gives us a picture of what our data looks like. So we can see, the A's are towering at 5. D's are really kind of low. It looks like things are trying to kind of level off, but these two categories are standing out. So hopefully this is an improvement over that list of data we had before. And that's our goal. And we're going to develop this more in this chapter. So there you have it. If you have any questions, let me know.